Welcome to the Sankofa Pan-African series. Please support us through Patreon or by buying me coffee. Subscribe and turn on your notification button. And please don't forget to check out our new website, sankofastorybooks.com, for history, Afrocentric stories, and other resources for our children. Now, some researchers claim that syphilis was carried from the New World to Europe after Columbus's voyages, while others argue that the disease has a much longer history in Europe. The first recorded major outbreak of syphilis in Europe was in 1495 among French soldiers who were blockading Naples in present-day Italy. Some studies claim that syphilis was actually transmitted to the French by Spanish mercenaries. From that outbreak, the disease then spread across Europe. One way or another, syphilis got into Europe and was a major killer during the Renaissance. It is estimated that over 1 million Europeans were infected. And according to a 2020 study, over 20% of Londoners aged between 15 and 34 years old were treated for syphilis in the late 18th century. So many well-known Europeans like Scott Joplin, Frank Schubert, Friedrich Nietzsche, Lenin, and Edward Manet are believed to have contracted the disease. Even the famous British Prime Minister Winston Churchill's father, Lord Randolph Churchill, is believed to have died from syphilis. So the disease proved really difficult to cure, as most of the medicines that they kept trying to use to treat it was fatal. By 1932, the U.S. Public Health Service, working with the Tuskegee Institute, began the so-called Tuskegee study of untreated syphilis in Negro male. That was the title of the study. The study involved 600 black men. 399 of them had syphilis, while 201 did not have the disease. These human beings that the US government was using as lab rats were only told that they were being treated for bad blood. As such, those of them who only had mild diseases, even things as mild as fatigue or anemia, which could have been easily treated, were roped into this insane experiment. They were enticed with a promise of free medical examination, free meals, and burial insurance. The men were easy to entice because most were poor and illiterate. They were given micro doses of the medicines that were being used to treat syphilis at the time, only in order to make them believe that they were being treated. However, when some of these men realized that they were not getting any better, they stopped going for the treatment. So, the United States Public Health Service hired a nurse to drive them to and from their appointments, provide them with hot meals, and deliver their medicines. In order to ensure that the men would not receive treatment from other doctors who were not part of the experiment, a list of their names was actually circulated to other doctors and medical centers around with the instruction that they should not be treated if they showed up at any health care facility. Even in 1941, when many of the men were drafted to fight in the Second World War, when they went to be tested in order to get into the army and were found to have syphilis, they were removed from the army instead of being treated to cure their syphilis. Most painfully, even by 1943, when penicillin was being successfully used to cure the disease, the participants in the study were still not offered treatment. During this callous study, which lasted 40 years, these black men were denied treatment for syphilis so that the butchers who called themselves doctors or researchers could watch them die and then use their autopsy to study the kind of damage that the untreated disease could do to human bodies. It wasn't until November 16th, 1972, when the New York Times published a front page article on the Tuskegee syphilis experiment that it was finally ended. Of course, the US government tried to underplay the bestial nature of the experiment by claiming that only a fraction of the men had died as a result of it, even though by then only 74 of the test subjects were still alive. 128 patients had died of syphilis or its complications. 40 of their wives had been infected, and 19 of the children that were born to these men had been born with congenital syphilis. In 1973, a class action lawsuit was filed on behalf of the victims of the Tuskegee syphilis experiment and their families. But it only resulted in a $10 million out-of-court settlement in 1974. The last of the men died in January 2004, while the last surviving widow died in January 2009. Some of the children are probably still alive. Thanks for watching. Please support us through Patreon or by buying me coffee. Subscribe and turn on your notification buttons. And please check out our new website, sankofastorybooks.com, for history, Afrocentric stories, nursery rhymes, and other resources for our children.